According to a new study from The Hill, the EPA's new rules to cut greenhouse gas emissions at power plants will actually end up creating more jobs than it will cut. Now, this is, of course, according to a new analysis from the Economic Policy Institute. Now, first of all, a little bit of background on the EPA's rules. Now, the EPA's Clean Power Plan, they call it, would require existing power plants to cut their greenhouse gas emissions and transition to a cleaner supply of energy. Now, what are the job numbers on this? Well, the EPA has previously estimated that this plan would create 120,000 jobs by the year 2020. Now, how many jobs would it lose? Now, this is the critical question. Now, if it creates 120,000 jobs, but then you lose 160,000 jobs by shifting away from coal-fired power plants or oil drilling, all these oilmen or coal miners lose their jobs, well, then it wouldn't be worth it. Now, would it? Well, according to the EPA estimates, only 24,000 jobs would be eliminated. However, the 120,000 jobs would more than seem to make up for that. Now, interesting. Now, what do they base this on? Well, they base this on the EPI, the Economic Policy Institute, said that this would be because of a ripple effect in the job market or in other industries related to the production of energy. So if you transition to solar power, for example, and start to really kind of create that en masse, where you're going to get a lot of manufacturing for solar panels instead, right? It only makes sense that if you start to invest in another part of industry, that it's going to create jobs in that industry, that they're going to expand their operations to now meet a new demand. Now, coal is already on its way out. I mean, coal's been hammered hard, right? And I think it's about time. Coal is the dirtiest, one of the dirtiest sources of fuel that we have, if not the dirtiest. I'm not sure which is worse, tar sands or coal. I would have to say that they're both pretty bad. So without having to do a direct comparison of how much worse one is than the other, I can pretty much just say that they're both pretty bad. And as far as coal goes, we've been using coal since the 1800s. It is an ancient, dirty source of fuel that we should definitely divest away from. And the EPA agrees. That's why they set these greenhouse gas limits, to further penalize the use of coal. Now, coal, the only reason we use coal, by the way, is that it's cheap, right? Well, there's been recent studies that say that wind power, when properly invested in, actually becomes cheaper than coal when you factor in all the environmental factors. And that's what a lot of people don't do, right? They'll look at the startup costs for wind and some of the environmental dangers of wind power, which I understand can be impactful negatively to some of the wildlife. I get it. Birds will fly into them and get chopped up, right? I get it. Some people are upset with the noise, etc., whatever. Now, for me, I kind of laugh at that a little bit, because it's like, well, what would you rather have in your backyard? A windmill or a coal plant? When you put it like that and kind of give that comparison, people are like, well, I might be okay with the wind after all. So, that's why I kind of laugh at that whole sort of thing. But anyway, coal's on its way out. And wind, as I said, wind and solar are getting cheaper and cheaper as we get them more efficient, as we invest in it a little bit more, get the technologies a little bit better. We still have a long way to go. But there's that. Now, part of those ripples in other industry are related to, of course, those declining costs in using those alternative energies. And of course, of all the jobs it'll create for manufacturing of these parts. And other things related to that as well. So that's significant. That's very significant. Now, how substantial is this ripple effect? As I said, well, the EPI estimates that by 2030, the deadline for, by 2020, there would actually be 360,000 new jobs. So the EPA's estimate is very conservative, about 120,000 jobs. But with that ripple effect, that increases their estimate to about 360,000 jobs. Now, these are estimates, obviously, and estimates sometimes can get overblown. And I understand that. But regardless of that, a loss of 24,000 jobs for a possible net gain, with everything factored in, of 360,000 jobs, or even 120,000 jobs, straight up, that seems like a no-brainer to me. That seems like, that is a net increase in jobs. And it helps the environment. It seems like a win-win. It seems pretty rational and logical. Now, of course, there are conservatives out there that are being paid by the coal industry, for example, Mitch McConnell, that would argue against that. And of course, they do. Now, as I said, by 2030, the deadline for state compliance with Clean Power Plan greenhouse gas reduction targets, the plan's employment benefits will have waned. Now, to the point of where it would create a net increase of 24,342 jobs total. So, so that's very interesting. So even with that, there's also still a net increase in jobs. Not very much, but there you go. As I said, estimates, they're not always perfect, but nonetheless, what's the harm in not doing it? What is the harm in trying to protect the environment and create jobs in the first place, both together? It makes no sense to just stick with what we have, as it continues to have huge environmental impacts in these areas. We got to do something better, and even if this report is wrong and we don't get nearly as many jobs as we thought, as long as we have enough to make up the shortfall and it's cheaper, then why not go with it? Why not continue to invest in these industries to make them profitable, so that we can look? It's not mutually exclusive that you can save the environment, protect the environment, and make money off of it too. Those are not mutually exclusive ideas, and we should really be focusing on doing both.